Hello, Ellen. Welcome to the Transformational Learning Summit.
Hi, Lawrence. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And I always like to start these sessions with a question of what does transformation as a word mean to you? What is your relationship with this idea of transformation?
Hmm. Well, as you just mentioned it, the first image that came was of a butterfly. And yeah, so transformation in a way it means to me, it means change. But in these recent years, I started to think about, I think when I started my path of personal development and was a lot about growth and self-improvement and becoming better and learning more. And these recent years, I started to embrace the idea of unfolding more, um, which is unfolding into wholeness and becoming more of me, becoming more self-expressed, living more authentically, and just being more of me. So
Mm,
that is what transformation means to me. It's like becoming more yourself.
mm. I love the context of that. I love the idea of that in the context of a learning space, inviting people to be more of who they are in wholeness in the context of learning something or being in some kind of social container. And I'd love to maybe start with uh, an understanding of what you learned as in your role of course steward with the Coaches Rising programs that you were supporting.
Yeah. So Coaches Rising offers online coaching programs for or advanced coaching programs for coaches, and so quite large cohorts. And as a course steward, I was responsible. I just recently transitioned out of the role, handed it over to someone else, but in that role, I was responsible for the whole delivery of the program. So was in contact with the cohort, all the participants, also with the faculty, just making sure that the whole program runs smoothly and that everyone has a good transformational learning experience. And part of that is, and I still do that part, I'm facilitating the actualization sessions, um, which are sessions where people gather to actually start embodying the learnings of the programs. And it's been very interesting because I was used to, when I started this role, I really had to think about how to work with large groups online. I worked a lot in person, and also online with smaller groups, like groups up till 20. And in these sessions, there sometimes are 150 people. So, um, and I think at the core of my work is that I want to facilitate connection. And so connection to self and connection to others. And so I had to think about how do I create practices and facilitate ways so that people can experience that kind of connection with each other. I think that's one of the core elements that I've learned. Um, and it's been a wonderful place to experiment and
Mm,
try new things out and, just explore what's possible in large groups like that. And I
mm,
must say
mm,
that it is a special group of people because they're all coaches. And so there are amazing people who are good listeners usually. So there is in the space oftentimes deep listening happening already. There's a willingness to go in and experiment and show up for each other. And so it's a really amazing group to work with. Yeah.
mm. And that's a really important nuance too, is the context of the people showing up, because you have a space here with people who are very willing and familiar with this more receptive territory, versus maybe a corporate environment where it's a little more alien. And I also like what you're talking about, like the experimenting with the connection and different practices. That's such a territory close to my heart. So I'd love to geek out on that for a moment. Um, I just wonder, are there any like specific things you've learned, whether at some sort of top level strategy or approach level, or like nitty gritty, like specific practices or activities that you'd like to weave in, um, uh, at different parts of a learning journey. But if I ask you this question, like what stands out for you as far as um, how you approach like the specificity of creating connection in a program space?
Yeah, well, it starts all with me, and I've noticed that, especially with larger groups, the tension for me to show up in a certain way increases. So I noticed that when there's more people that potentially could judge me as a facilitator, I had a bit of a pattern of going into something that felt more safe. And I learned that, it's still like, if I show up, if I embody the qualities that I want to invite into the space, yeah, that's just the most powerful. And so that's one of the things that I really practiced with and experimented with, like how vulnerable or how authentic am I daring to show up in the space. And I've learned that I can actually, you can go, yeah. So I learned to take more risks on that side, to be just more boldly vulnerable, and yeah, just taking my time. And because I do think that that's, even the space of like showing up with a process in mind, or having prepared something, but then allowing the emergence to come in, and for me to take that in, and then having that impact me might change what I want to be doing. But then sometimes I need a little bit of time to digest, or to be silent, and to know what is my next step. And I think, yeah, what I've over the years have learned, or I have just become more comfortable with just taking that space, and yeah, being able, or daring to let go of what I was planning on, and just following what's most alive in the group, and
Hmm.
trusting that I have enough capacity, but also enough tools to change, like, and bring in something new.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, so I don't know, like, yeah, that's maybe my personal practice, and that is was something that I've learned. It's not something like an insight I had, or but yeah, just the, building that capacity to be comfortable with that way of leading, basically.
Hmm. When you're running an actualization session, or say a regular session that you might be running with a large group, what does that look like in practice in terms of um, do you is it just entirely emergent? You have no plan and people just show up and you kind of go with the flow, or do you have a particular flow that you've created a structure for the session, and then you practice just remaining receptive to what wants to emerge and kind of going with that? Like what does it actually look like in practice?
Yeah, I definitely have some kind of a flow, because um, it also ties into a larger arc of the whole program that people are in. So the one session happens at the end of a module, so definitely integrate what we've done in that module, practice with some of the things that were offered to us, or learnings, and so that's there. um, but I do like flowing with what's emerging, so I will often have space within a session for that emergence to happen. And sometimes it does happen that I just, in the moment decide to do something different than I was planning on. But I usually do have something prepared and like an idea of practices. And what is also true is that I have some basic ingredients of a session, which will entail like a meditation to bring people into connection to the moment and to bring them in the here and now, becoming more present, becoming more present to their own experience. And I also often create some kind of practice for connection so that people have an opportunity to feel a deeper connection with other participants.
What does that look like?
Well, there's one practice that is actually coming from the circling paradigm, and you might know it. It's the noticing game, which is a really simple practice. And I often do some kind of version of that practice. So people will go into a smaller breakout, ideally like dyad or triad. And then what I like about the noticing game is that it brings the conversation into the present moment. So the invitation for people is to start with feeling themselves and then just start connecting with the other person. And as they are together, they kind of like sharing, being here with you, I notice or I feel. And then the other person just takes that in and then see, like, just experiencing what the impact of that is and then replying like, hearing that, I notice or I feel. And then let that conversation unfold for about 5 to 10 minutes. And what I like about it is that it creates intimacy between people. So it brings the conversation into the present moment, and it creates closeness. But people also, you kind of like move away from content. So you just like sharing with each other what's arising in the moment. And that conversation then unfolds and often unfolds into more depth, which helps people to connect to more depth in themselves. And I love that because, it's just a different way of connecting than what we usually do when we share, like, oh, this is who I am, this is where I work, and this is how I find the course, or this is what I'm learning, which is also great. But it's often not creating the same kind of connection and closeness. So, and I've created all kinds of varieties on that theme of connecting. But yeah, I do love starting with something like that.
I love that, because I think that like for me, one of the ingredients of, or one of the building blocks of intimacy, or maybe just the simplicity of one of the most intimate things that you can share with somebody is what's present for you in this moment, is what's actually arising for you. You don't need to share the details of some household personal issue. Like, it's very intimate to just really become present to and actually share what is arising for you in this moment. And I also find that a version of inviting that into a conversational space really offers a direct access to, first to presence, and then through that to really meaningful connection with another person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's such a powerful thing to teach people or to have people flow into that kind of yeah.
So when you're, I want to just like get a slightly um, a deeper sense of like the overall structure of say a large program space with maybe 100+ people in it. You have the actualization sessions that, as far as I understand, they basically offer a space for integration. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
And other elements of the program design that you were maybe iterating or prototyping with over the years of setting up an online space that were designed to somehow support this this aspiration for presence and connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just also want to add to that, like the programs that we run, they offer a lot of tools as well. So,
Mm,
for example, around the power of embodied transformation or the power of presence. So part of the programs is already very transformational practices or transformational ideas that I can then, play with in the actualization sessions.
mm,
And you're calling it an integration session. I think what um, what I really love to do in these sessions, and I think is so powerful, and we need much more of in life anyway, is to have space where you can show up in that way with each other, especially with in presence. So like just being with each other without an agenda or without needing to fix or coach or solve anything, but just being with each other, and then in a gentle but deep inquiry, and letting the conversation unfold in that way. Because often what happens when we are in presence together, um, and just be together in that way, just being with, and with an attitude of acceptance and openness and curiosity, is that we unfold into deeper depths. And what I really love about this work is that people then start to tap into their innate resourcefulness, and there's already a wisdom and already capacity present, and it becomes, it starts to open up, it becomes available for them. And then, well, in coaching, for example, then that's like really interesting place to explore a certain topic or challenge from. So in these sessions, what I tend to do, or what I aim for, is to create a space like that where people can actually unfold into deeper depths and
mm.
have that experience of like, yeah, wholeness, or nothing's lacking really, and can tap into their innate powerfulness or power and wisdom. um,
And is that a conversational process where you're inviting people to notice more attributes of their experience, noticing, I mean, you use the word kind of acceptance, and um, do you invite people to notice where they might be holding on to something or judging something, or how do you invite people to become present to their experience in deeper ways?
yeah. So, and this is where my love for the relational comes in, because
Mm,
we can do this with each other's support. It's hard to know my own blind spots, but in relationship, we can point that out or mirror for each other. We can support each other in becoming more aware. Um, so it's like, yeah, we offer people practices, or we offer people, guiding lights of how to become more aware of those edges or impediments of being in a deeper presence.
mm. Is there a specific practice you can share?
Let me think. Um, well, so one of the guiding lights is like, trusting the emergence. So what's coming up, and trusting that. So even, your own experience, it's like, start noticing where you start to resist. So can you embrace what's here? Can you welcome yourself exactly the way you are? And then there might be resistance, like, oh, actually, no, I want to feel more confident, or I want to. So those are like little clues where you can become more aware of
Mm.
edges, or where you're not completely welcoming yourself yet. So that's a simple practice that
Hmm. So you're just inviting people to notice more of their experience and integrate it into their awareness of what's really present for them in the moment.
yeah, it really starts with awareness. And I often make the distinction between mindfulness, like being present, and being in presence. So, I can be mindful and aware of what's happening, but it really requires presence, which to me are often hold qualities of this acceptance, or an openness and a curiosity, love maybe, um, where it's like really a welcoming of what is.
Hmm. Can you say a little more about that distinction that you're making between mindfulness and presence?
Yeah. Um, well, for me, what I mean by that is that with the mindfulness, like being present, that's really, the witness that can witness experience coming up and going, but I can also be very, mindful, or aware of what's happening, but actually having a lot of judgment around it, or feeling resistance. So this is not quite presence, because when I'm in presence, there's this, yeah, just a more spacious experience, a more, everything's okay, and I can just be with what's here with an open heart. But I
Hmm.
can also be mindful with a more closed heart. So that's, to me, is the like a difference. Like, it can be,
Hmm.
and I think you need both, right? So you need to like practice both, like practicing the witness capacity, as well as like being in present, like being, um yeah.
And would that involve also you notice your judgment
Yeah.
to just welcome it and allow kind of be present with your judgments?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And bringing that back to facilitation, I think that is so key when we're leading these transformational spaces, is that we enter the space, with, being present and in presence, and inviting others into the practice. And for me personally, I don't know, if you recognize this or have some resonance with it, but I actually find groups quite intimidating. So there's a part of me that's actually, very anxious when leading. And so, oftentimes I have to start with just becoming aware of that fear. And it's actually became, now has become like a support, because this fear also invites me to become to enter my vulnerability. So, and
Mm.
just being aware of it and embracing it, like, oh yeah, there's a part of me that's actually quite scared, and that
Mm.
can be here too. And there's a part of me that loves it, and really enjoys this work and want to show up in front of the group. And then there's a part that's scared. Can I invite both to be here? And I don't have to mention it at the start of a call, but just having that attitude in me, I believe that that's already transmitted in the space, and it
Mm.
will invite or welcome other people's parts, their vulnerability, or difficult parts that they might have.
I think
Mm.
there's so much depth to what you're saying, both in terms of well, the words that come up for me are power, courage, and commitment. Yeah, because I also, holding group spaces for me can be very challenging internally. And people are often really surprised to hear me say that, because they're like, you seem so confident and you seem so charismatic. And I know that I seem that way. And but there's also kind of like a lifetime of social anxiety that I've always had beneath the surface. And that in particular comes up when I'm managing or holding a large group space. And I have a similar response of or I've cultivated a similar practice of um, becoming present to, becoming present to, and really also feeling the energy of it, the fabric of it as a felt sense in my body, and just noticing, and then just allowing that to be there, but choosing to step into the experience. And that's the kind of the power and the courage to just to hold space for, or in the middle, if there is a something coming up in the group space. And so just again, noticing that and allowing it and having the courage to just be there. And then the commitment piece, which I think is also a big part. And I wonder if that's also the same. I think it's such a key part of a transformational space is one is you really need the commitment of the participants, but that kind of also starts with your own commitment to like the vulnerability, the authenticity, the showing up even when you really don't feel like showing up. So I wonder if that's also like how you relate to these three energies that I've just shared.
Yeah. And yeah, and the funny thing is like with the last thing that you said is that there's two things I want to say actually. It's yeah, you need the participation of others, like the willingness to show up as well, which includes their not wanting to show up.
Mm.
Um, their resistance. And I think naming that is often gives so much permission in the space, like, oh, you can just show up in any way you are right now, and everything is welcome. You are welcome. Um, and the other thing that you mentioned, it's like you're holding space for yourself, but again with this presence, like, can you love that part that is actually, managing inside, but also, that's actually anxious or feels resistance to do that. So I often say to my clients that, I have that little girl, because it's a little girl that's actually scared. I often, have her on my lap. It's like
Mhm.
I have a 4-year-old as well, so it's easy to imagine to have her like sitting with me.
Mm.
But then I'm kind of holding her, um, and she can feel safe with me because, but I'm in charge, like presence. I come from a place of presence, and I can, lead from that place.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Where do you find as in your role as a facilitator of a group space, where do you find or how do you um, relate to the territory of what's appropriate for you to be authentic about in the group space? Because inevitably, I mean, I don't know about you, but especially in the world of Zoom, like things going on in your life, and sometimes there's a big Zoom call at a really not good time, and there's stuff coming up for you that is personal, or just not necessarily something that maybe you feel belongs in the space. And sometimes it's authentic and powerful to share and open up about that, and sometimes it's not. And so
Mm.
I'm curious how you navigate that territory of um, the the permission to be authentic and vulnerable for yourself.
Yeah, that is a big topic that you're now addressing, and I often say to people, like, I encourage people to play around with it, like to find their truth, because I often, my experience is that um what's how do you say this in English? Like more often than not,
Hmm.
it's actually been very powerful if I brought in something personal. Um, but I hesitate sometimes because I don't want it to become about me, or that's not the purpose of the call, of me
Hmm.
needing something. So that's like the balance, right? And that's a difficult one to navigate. Like you want to share something in service of the space deepening, but you don't want the attention or process to become about you. And I think there's ways where I've learned to share what my experience, and rather than going into the content of things, I can just share like a dilemma that I'm sitting with, or might be something like there's a lot happening in my life, and I want to show up here and be in my strength and powerfulness, and I notice like there's also maybe a distraction, or there's, I'm sitting here with sadness as well. So you kind of, and then often what I do is then I make an invitation for people. So and the invitation would be to be in the practice again. So I might say something like, okay, so this is happening. I'm sitting with a dilemma. I want to be here, show up, and lead this session well. And there's something came up, and I'm feeling sad, or whatever it is that I'm experiencing. And then I add an invitation, like I just want to invite all of me to this space, and I want to invite all of you into the space as well. Whatever is happening for you. So it becomes almost like, again, an embodiment of the practice,
Mm-hmm.
and an invitation for others to practice along with you.
Mm-hmm. And there's something really powerful about that. I mean, it's interesting for me is I think you could very much say we're both, students of this kind of work. And so whenever I'm in another person's space, I also am both a participant there and kind of a noticing all the dynamics of the structure of the experience. And one thing I always notice is the disposition of the space holder, and so some people um tend to be much more, there's kind of a clear boundary of like their personal world and their like what they're holding space for, and they never, you never get to really see that internal world. And so this is true for some of the most advanced kind of spiritual. I actually find it's almost more true for certain like very kind of like, you know what's the right word, prominent spiritual teachers, okay, who are holding space. They're really great at holding a space that opens up deep vulnerability and sharing from the participants, but that there's a certain boundary there that never gets crossed. And then being in some spaces where the space holder is a little more transparent about their internal reality and their internal process, and um, the way that creates a certain, for me at least, I really appreciate that because it creates a certain invitation to deeper humanity and relatability between the the convener and the participant, and somehow for me that it feels a little more like a more level playing field where there's still a distinction between the space holder and the participant, but somehow a little more human relatability between those two roles. I wonder if you have any reflections on that.
Yeah, I'm just smiling because I can relate to that so much. There's I I just I just feel so much love when someone opens up and shares their humanity. So I actually recently had a spiritual teacher that, I think very highly of, and listen a lot to, and all of a sudden, in this particular podcast, he revealed something about his relationship, and my respect for him deepened so much, because all of a sudden I was like, wow. So he is also experiencing these kinds of challenges, and it was lovely to hear how he was relating to it, and I just got so much out of it, and it deepened my trust in that person even more. And
Mm,
I think, yeah, so core what you're saying, um it's just really, yeah, just very beautiful to see and feel someone's humanity, and to be human together. I think, yeah, just feel something landing in me as I say that, and looking at you. It's like, yeah, there's something with being human together and exploring, to me, like these are spiritual values, like how can we integrate spiritual values in our ways of being and in the ways we are working together. And yeah, it's just so
Mm.
powerful. Yeah.
And I find there's a in the end, I find that there's a one of the discoveries for me, and this is a discovery I kind of make over and over, is that in the end, as much as I'm holding the space is also holding me.
Yes.
And that's part of the support that for me is also easy to forget.
Mm.
Uh, I mean, and when I say like remember and forget, like it's one thing to encounter that concept conceptually, like, oh, the space is holding me. It's another thing to discover it experientially, where you actually feel held in the space, right? So I can go into a space and I can have all the like theoretical ideas about it all I want, right? It's meaningless until it becomes a lived experience. So I do find that there's a discovery, like if I'm going through a challenging internal experience as a holder of a space, to then at some point discover that if I'm willing and vulnerable and kind of like really step into it, that also it's not just me there, that the space is also holding me in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's in a way we're kind of like allowing presence to lead, right? So
Mm,
this is how I see it. It's like I'm kind of facilitating a space and I'm inviting a certain practice, but then at the same time I'm a practitioner myself.
right.
And so if I stay in that facilitator role, there will be this hierarchy and the hierarchy will impact me, but will also impact the group. So it's interesting, like part of what you're sharing in my world is like also, am I able to, be equals to the others and surrender, I am still facilitating, I'm still holding the process, but at the same time, can I let something else lead me and
Mm,
lead the space? And that's that something else, which for me is some presence, is also, holding me. So
mm.
yeah, definitely have that experience as well.
And I find it such a, just as you're
Yeah.
sharing, it's such a almost like a recursive process back to what we were saying about like you said, this word equal you used, and I just find it so helpful to become aware of the subtle ways in which the um, the world or the space might be occurring to you, the subtle ways in which you don't think you're equal. Either you think you're not worthy, or you're anxious about the space, or you think you know more than the people. It's so natural, right? And if you think that that's not there for you, then that might be something to look at. But there's all sorts of subtle things that are present in the occurring of a situation to us that that's actually a very much a practice that I bring into almost before I step into any call, like whether it's a recording like this or particularly group experiences. Who am I to myself in this experience, and who is the person to me, and just to become present to the many layers and nuances in that awareness, which again kind of creates this field of acceptance and presence just before the experience actually starts, that I find is um, very conducive to inviting this presence. I wonder if that resonates with you in some way.
Yeah, totally. Like I also like even if it's only 5 minutes or just to check in, like how am I doing? Who am I in this moment?
Mm,
Can I welcome myself? Am I how welcoming am I of myself, of my experience in this moment? Is there resistance? Is there maybe, something that's difficult for me? And to not resist that, but then just like, okay, great. Because that's the beauty of it. It's like I don't have to change who I am. I don't have to like be in a certain way but just welcoming what's here, just being present to what's here and welcoming of that is often the thing that drops me into that presence, and then I can go in.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular um, practices or reflections on um, like what happens after a session, the way that you personally, you facilitated a group space, maybe something came up or, or whatever, particularly in maybe a group experience that was like maybe a little more challenging. And then after that, how you might process and integrate. Do you like talk to somebody? Do you sit with it? Like what's your process for kind of integrating the experience of holding a space?
Mhm. Well, I definitely, I have my husband who's also deeply immersed in this kind of work. So definitely oftentimes have someone to talk to. But there's also practices that I can do to process, with me, like for myself. So I have an embodiment practice, which is really good to, process emotions and so on a bodily level, what happened or any impact. And then, yeah, writing, I journal a lot to make sense of what happened, but also to, again, process, to create more self-awareness, like what is it? How do I reflect on what came up, or what matters to me? What do I care about? So those are like the practices that I do to integrate. And how about you? Like, what are your practices?
Usually if something is very challenging, if I have a session that was particularly challenging, or if I feel like um, I did something wrong, which occasionally it'll, or like I mean, there's a broad spectrum of what doing something wrong can be. Doing something wrong can be saying something that was like, oh, shit, or doing something, but more often, doing something wrong is we tried to do too much in a session, and then it got too compressed at the end, and then it didn't quite end the way that we wanted it to, right? We wanted to kind of end with a particular quality of presence and spaciousness, and it just, because of the timeline, and we always try to be like very mindful of like ending on time. In the end, it just kind of felt rushed and compressed, and that's kind of like, and sometimes depending on the context, on how important it was to us to like really end well. But when I say us, I also often hold space with Natasha, my wife. And so there, like I might come out of a call and be like, feeling like some sort of contraction or being self-critical. And so usually for me, that will be sitting with it, noticing it. If it's something where I felt like, oh, like really not great, did something not great, it'll be like, what can I learn here? And I think that's one of the biggest reframes for me. And the challenging thing is like, what is there to learn? Because I can beat myself up about it forever. But if I can reframe it as like, okay, this happened and this is a learning experience, then it provides me with some sort of input for like for the something constructive for the future. And then of course just um also processing with my wife. But I do find that's something I think about a lot, is having the importance, if you're facilitating a space, of um, like part of it for me, a transformational space, is that people have a chance to come into deep presence with each other, and I think that's also very important, to have that with somebody else, to
Mhm.
really process and become present to the many nuances of how something then kind of gets stuck in your body.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, when as you say that, I also, the one others, I've got like lots of colleagues that I can reach out to and share with, and yeah, that's also so meaningful to just
Mm.
explore with them, what 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 got touched in me, and yeah, it's definitely connection again, so
Mm.
important in the relationship, like being reflected and having someone to see you and in it, and to be
You
listened to.
you mentioned working with embodiment, kind of as a process for integration. Um, What's been your experience working with inviting embodiment into online spaces, like in a group space? Have you played with embodiment much?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, I love it. I think it's so important. I include the body in my work, and again, the I teach nonlinear movement, and that is in itself, it's such a simple practice, but so potent because you kind of turn your attention inward, and you basically are meeting yourself with full presence from moment to moment. And you kind of like touch what's happening inside, like the sensations of a contraction, or maybe an emotion, or maybe a thought. And you kind of touch that with movement or your breath. And again, it's like when we're moving with what you're feeling, that starts to transform or unfold, and then the next thing arises. So it's basically a similar process, just welcoming what's here, meeting what's here from moment to moment, and then unfoldment will happen. So you start to drop into deeper depths and into more presence. I love that practice, and I will integrate that whenever I can. But then we have this program, the power of embodied transformation, and in that program we teach like a whole way of transforming through the body, rather than through exploring or yeah just uh, yeah, just really actually accessing the body and working with posture and with contractions and with new ways of being that you want to invite into, but just working with the body and establishing transformation. So yeah, definitely something that I think is so powerful to work with.
Can you give me a specific example of how what an embodied activity might look like with a large group space online?
Yeah. So a practice that I've done more often is well, I'll have people, go into meditation and presencing what's here, and then connecting to, for example, something that they really care about. Like, it could be like, why did you join this program? Or why did you become a coach? We work with coaches, so what's your deepest intention or aspiration for being a coach? Um, which connects people to a deeper value and aliveness in that sense. And then I have people, take on a posture that that goes with that aspiration. So in the meditation, they will take on a posture, and then I will put people in breakouts and just have them like review, like show each other, and then have other people mirror that back. So they
Mm,
learn like, yeah, they get to be seen in their, in the embodiment of their highest aspiration. But the others learn to attune, so they can start practicing like, tuning and feeling the other person, taking it on, and just, seeing what wisdom or what can they learn from mirroring someone, and then they
mm,
reflect back to each other. So it's like, yeah, it's just again connection, revealing something about yourself, but also being seen, and the others, like through their presence and attention and attunement, they kind of offer something in return,
mm.
um, which is, yeah, really sweet practice as well.
And there's something so powerful in mirroring. It's like an embodied statement of seeing. It's just so intimate to have another person first to express something through your body, and then to have another person like actually take that shape on. I mean, it just never happens, right? So it seems so simple and understated, but I find it's actually really, really powerful.
Yeah,
Um,
and also then reflecting like, so when I'm standing in this posture, I notice or feel or these words come up.
mm,
So then you kind of learn to integrate the wisdom of the body. It's like, oh, there's a different way of knowing. It's not through inquiry and understanding, but it's intuitive. and comes through resonance, and it is, often resonates a lot for the other person. So it's really, yeah, just really lovely to integrate the body in that way, and the wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the statement you just used, the wisdom of the body. And there's something so deep there. I mean, here we're talking about, in the context of coaching and maybe what's your highest aspiration. But I do find in my practice with embodiment online is that you can bring it into a lot of different contexts, and that the body has a relationship with everything. And so almost any subject or topic can somehow, you can find a way to express with your body, that then, if you're attentive, can connect you to that intelligence, that there is this other intelligence that's in our bodies that is actually quite intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah, and it picks up so much, it receives so much information from other people, but also the space. Yeah, so learning to listen to those cues in you and being able to integrate that in, weaving it into the space and into the work that we're doing. I think it's very potent and
Mm. And it
very,
really lands in this like relational, in what becomes available in this kind of relational space, right?
yeah, yeah.
Mhm. You used the word attunement earlier, and I really love that word. And so you used it in the context of mirroring as a practice of attunement. Are there other um, practices that you worked with that you think about as far as honing this capacity for attunement between people?
Um, Well, I know this is a practice, and I that you use as well. If I've heard you bring it in, but it's like Thomas Hubel's practice of like, I'm feeling me and I'm
Mm,
feeling me, and this like attuning to that. Yeah, just now practicing as I'm saying it. It's
mm,
just, it opens me up right away in a beautiful way. But just consciously have people practice with, in a diet or in a triad, like sharing, attuning to themselves, to their own experience, attuning to the other person. What are you aware of when you tune to the other? But then I usually also offer the third option, to attune to the relationship. So attuning to what's between us, and have people consciously just explore that and share with each other, like, what does the connection feel like? What did you, when you tune to the connection, like, what what comes up? What does
mm,
that up?
mm.
Yeah.
How do you think about, and I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, but so a lot of what we're talking about so far has been um, practices that you work with in the context of a live session. Also, just whether it's an internal awareness and in the presence with which you show up, or the practices that you work with to cultivate deeper levels of a presence and attunement in the space. Um, do you, in the programs that you've set up, do you also try to bring a level of engagement and conversation into an online platform of some choice? I know you guys don't use Sutra, but is there also some sort of design thinking around an online social space? Is that part of the work you've done at all?
Well, we do offer those spaces with
Mm,
our course environment, and we usually have a group on social media. But it is different. So I noticed that the conversations there are more content based,
mm,
questions on what's being said, or sharing resources, which is also very useful and beautiful. I think it adds to the quality of the program and to the shared learning. But it's a different kind of connection. It's not usual that I see people sharing very personal, um, uh, shares. Yeah,
Mm,
don't know
mm.
if that's your question, but
And what about just the overall like community? Because I imagine you have this incredible community of coach alumni that have passed through your programs and which by nature are very intimate. What has been your um, process for stewarding that community in one way or another?
yeah. Well, it's actually that something that I learned when I did a course with you guys in the transformational. Can't remember
Experience
the.
design.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, everyone always messes it up.
And what I learned was that you put us in little pots, and
Mm,
because the cohort was really large, but then the little pot became my sutra community.
mm.
Within that's actually my group still. It's been, what was it, 2020 when I
A while ago, yeah. I think you were part of our second cohort.
yeah, and
Mm.
our group still meets
Mm,
actually.
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's cool.
very active, very lovingly, and it's really wonderful. So I'm still in contact with them, and um, I realized like, oh yeah, the smaller groups, the personal connections are easier to maintain or to create in a smaller group. And that becomes then the extension of sutra, because those are my sutra people, and of course you and Natasha. But um, we always created practice diets. So, and I realized like, oh, so in Coaches Rising, people only have this kind of relationship with one other person. So I started to create larger pots so that people have more connection. And we offer now, practices that people can still do in their practices, but a bit more tailored to a larger group. And I think that's been a very important learning for me. So that, yeah, because people will feel connected to the organization.
Hmm.
But that's what yeah, what really connects people to, and there's also very deep friendships that people that unfold from those connections. Really wonderful to hear. And it's all outside of our, we only facilitate it lightly.
Mm.
uh, that happens, and that's very beautiful.
And are those groups organized just over email or on some platform, or what does the actual like organization of those groups look like?
Yeah, so we kind of organize them based on where they are at in the world. So in the somewhat similar time zone, and then we kind of let go. So it's up
Mm.
to
So you
um,
connect them over email or something, and then it's up to them to self-organize.
yeah. So and then they meet regularly, often. So that's what we recommend. Um, I currently joined also a pod, and we have a group on WhatsApp where we app, and then we meet every other week to do practice together or just reflect on what we've been learning.
Hmm.
Um, so that's, I was going to say one thing about it. Yeah, it, I think for Coaches Rising, we have a very loyal community, even though we don't invest a lot outside of the programs. We don't invest a lot in community. And so within a program, we do. But I think what happens, why there's such a strong connection with the organization. Uh, for one, people really enjoy the service that we offer, but I often we do a lot of surveys and ask for a lot of feedback. And one of the things that I think what we do well is like to actually show up again, vulnerably, being real with people, not
Mm.
coming from this like, oh, we're very personal and very
Hmm.
relatable with people. And I think that's what creates a strong connection, and why people feel deeply connected to the organization, and yeah, often stay with us for many years.
Mm. Yeah, I very much resonate with that. I think that's also been one of the key ingredients of of our successes. And there's an interesting, I think there's a really good um, uh, blend of being personal and relatable and professional at the same time. You know, that you come across as you're really delivering value, and it comes through in um, like a polished form factor, even though it may not be perfect. And that and this, so there's this really nice intersection of like the professionalism while being really personal and relatable and human about that journey, that I find um, works. Is just really is just a really powerful combination in terms of building a project.
Yeah, and you're saying it's nice, and I think uh it's, you know, it's a strength. When I think if an organization hits the right spot, like you do with Sutra, and then it also made me remember that I reached out to you like years back, and I didn't really know what Sutra was, but there was just something with I read the mission of Sutra where I felt like, oh, there's such a resonance that had
Mm,
me reach out to you. Um, and I think it's a very powerful one, but not an easy one to navigate powerfully.
mm,
So
mm.
there's this, like a sweet spot you're calling it, and yeah, I think it's very powerful if an organization is able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. It's like as you say that, I know that we have it's not something that happened overnight. I think it's something, and I don't know about you, about Coaches Rising, but it's something that we iterated into really over a 10-year period of because it's easy to eh, I think there you can either be already a well-established organization, and that's one thing to try and be like have one way of being and try to transition into another way of being. That's a completely different thing. Or you could be starting from scratch, and that's where I feel like it's just a journey of iteration and finding what feels like the right expression, and also honing that expression, like the language that I use in my emails and the relationship that I have to the words that I use has that's probably the biggest thing that's changed over the last 10 years of doing this work. So I do find it's definitely not easy, but it is a very satisfying territory.
Yeah. Well, also in that way, I think of it as being in a practice. It's like
Mm,
still practicing what I'm teaching and what what I'm envisioning for possible for the world or for a transformational space. Or it's like, yeah, this deep listening, just being real about what's happening, how we're being impacted, and still being in your leadership. It's like this, this balancing this polarity between vulnerability and being in your power, and then yeah, just finding
mm.
a way to move from that from forward. Yeah.
I think this is really, coming back to the scope of this particular summit event, transformational learning. I think that this is the hardest thing to really get about, or at least the way I think about transformational, this idea of transformational learning is it's not something that you just deliver. It's something that you live, and the reality of a relational space is that it's alive, and what makes it alive is the way that you're in authentic relationship with it in every dimension of it, from the participation to it, to how you sell it, to how you like invite and register people into the experience, to how you communicate about it. So it has this incredible like multi-dimensionality to the reality of it. It's not just like something that is like this is how you do transformational learning and delivering this piece of learning. It's actually like it's a whole way of being that involves learning and transformation in every facet of operation.
Yeah, and maybe we can end with that, because I think that's it. I often talk about my work as being in my own practice, like whether I do a coaching session or whether I lead a group, I'm in my practice,
Mm,
and in inviting others into it as well,
mm,
which includes, like, yeah, being in the practice of living presence and embodying presence, as well as delivering a process or taking people through a process. Yeah, but it is a way of being that then is invited to be applied in every aspect of life.
Mm. Ellen, thank you so much. I really appreciate having this conversation with you, and um, just the wisdom and the insight of your journey and everything that you've learned and the work that you do today. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to learn together.
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel very enlivened and excited, and yeah, I just feel so much resonance with you and the work that you're doing. And yeah, so kudos and gratefulness to you as well for your journey and what you bring to the world.
Thank you, Ellen. Much love.
You too.